Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Plant-Free MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and today I have a very special guest, Ms. Jackoline Milne, who is joining me from northern British Columbia. Jackoline, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to this day.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, for people who haven't come across you before, can you tell us a bit about you and what you do?
Yeah, well, I'm a shepherdess, so I work with animals, and I've been trained in holistic management by Alan Savory. I traveled to Africa to the holistic, and it's called the African Center for Holistic Management near Victoria Falls. And that was my journey into sustainable agriculture was actually precipitated because about 30 years ago, I got very ill after I had my second child.
Hmm.
And I developed a lupus-like, they diagnosed me with lupus. I was very crippled for 2 years. It was agonizing, and that story is on No Carb Life, I think. I can't remember what his
Okay.
channel's called. And so, but I had a spontaneous remission occur when I had a little garden. I had gone barefoot because I could barely walk, and that is what lit me up. Like, what? Like this connection, how did this happen? So then I started to really, I went down the rabbit hole of eating a lot of plants, but I am a Métis, which is that in Canada, when you have ancestors who are First Nations, and your parents, are cross between that. So that's what I am. And so I've realized now that's probably one of the reasons why I've done so well on the carnivore diet. But what happened is, even though I recovered from the lupus, I started having every other kind of plant related problem if you eat too much. So oxalate, I started getting kidney stones from oxalate. And then my thyroid, I started reacting to brassica and I started getting these benign cysts. And then my gallbladder. So I had all these things. So I kept um, reducing and reducing the type and spectrum of plants and more meat. And then I stumbled upon Dr. Laszlo's work. And another gentleman who has a technology, George Wiseman, through Eagle Research, and he invented a really smart, energy efficient Brown's gas generator, okay? Which is a type of hydrogen therapy, but it's more than just generic hydrogen therapy, okay? I want to stress that. I'm going to tell you right out of the gate, okay? There's a chance that using his technology, we looks very promising that we may be able to produce our own deuterium deleted water at home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is not in the public. This is
Mhm.
not something George, but we've consulted with George, and
Mhm.
because of the uniqueness of our research project, because we've coined it the Family Deuterium Research Project, and it's about empowerment, mentoring each other to to the highest ability that we can to take back management of the vital things in our life, like our clean food and clean water and things like that. And we just recently had a consultation with him, and we're implementing this right now. It's kind of like chemistry, but he's did explain it that he's also been doing it. And he is working, just so you know, on actually making a little apparatus that could be added that can be sold. He'll
Mhm.
make them and sell them. So it's really close to that. But so what we're doing is implementing it in our research project. And so because of everyone involved is focused on learning about deuterium, learning how to reduce exposure to it, excessive ingestion of it. And the water was a real stumbling block because the commercial water that's available right now is so expensive and it makes it financially out of the reach of so many people. So this will be very transformational. Okay, I'm really optimistic about it. And so having the ability to have even just a small amount, like say 500 milliliters, it would be enough to augment the drinking water to bring it down to those safer lower levels, you
Mhm.
know? And and so part of what we're doing also is working towards having our own completely privately managed facility for testing our own water samples and food samples. Because basically what is kind of, come to this realization, like especially all the members and families, a lot of people in our group have very serious diagnoses that they're dealing with. And so the whole topic of reducing deuterium is it's so hopeful because it can have such a healing positive effect, right? And so, but the problem is this is such a new science. We are guessing. Oh, what's in this meat?
Mm.
Is it low? Is it high? What's in it? This is probably the most important ingredient that we could ever know that is in the food or not, and it's not available. And so this is why we want to be able to have our own facility. So then the foods we choose, because now you see it would make whoever is dealing with their particular diagnosis, if they want to target 100 ppm or less,
Mm.
if they have the data on what's really in the food, they can do the math and actually take control of it. And I really feel that the carnivore diet, it's one of the huge blessings is it naturally helps lower the deuterium exposure because of the way deuterium works and binds with fibers and carbohydrates and sugars and less with the fats and meats. And so, but to go forward with that, we also are looking at like studying plants because you see what's happened to the food kingdom is the plants have been bred away from the heirloom and more to be long shelf life GMO, which is causing the natural filters to have been removed and the plants are concentrating the deuterium. And so we're kind of hopeful that we might even have the ability to sort of focus on some particular foods like say sunflower seeds, okay? Sunflower seeds, the reason I'm interested in sunflower seeds is because of vitamin B1 and the stress. Like to have a supplement so it's not so much about necessarily using the foods as a food, but to use plants perhaps as medicine because there's this book
Mhm.
Buffalo Bird Woman. It's about 100 years old. An anthropologist wrote it because he met an indigenous woman living in northern United States. And turns out, you see, a lot of people don't know this, but the indigenous people were horticulturists. They were not just hunter-gatherers traveling. They also had a small window of domestic foods they grew, and they grew sunflower seeds, the oil ones, but they didn't eat them regular. They would make these little seed balls so that the men, when they would go hunting, eat a lot of stress, right? Burning up their vitamin B1, they would have these little sunflower seed balls that they would eat at certain periods of time connected to the activity. And so I went, oh, that's really interesting, and possibly vitamin E. Maybe a little bit is in there. I don't remember. And so they also grew squash, and they would dry it into these little wafers and take it with them in the winter. Now their focus was primarily meat, but the plant food they did have corn and beans, but it was fallback food. Like the plant foods tended to be when, okay, we don't have the meat. And the dried squash would be used like a potato chip to eat fat. Because fat, when it's cold, is hard. And heat, like back then, people, indigenous people didn't have roaring fires going, heating their house. They would just dress warm. And so food would be cold, and so there are those. So this is sort of the area we're curious about, if we can, is there ways, because it's very difficult for people to fully accept to not eat plants. It's hard. It's a hard, and I get it. And not everyone can easily, readily, and affordably access animal-based foods. And that's another deeper part of our project, because the animal-based foods truly are and can be the safest, lowest source of deuterium. That whole knowledge of animal raising needs to be strengthened, and people empowered to the highest capacity to even raise their own animals if possible. And so that is, so this is the structure of this project is based on Alan Savory's work of holistic management, which is a unique approach when we're kind of dealing with a situation. And a lot of times when he would be teaching, it would be they might lose their ranch. Maybe the soil is, it's desertifying. And so what happens is people go, oh, well, we gotta, go organic, which is great. Take care of the soil, and then maybe you'll have good revenue, so you'll be able to not have the bank take your farm. But he said, there's a third leg to the stool that's overlooked. The people who are in that system, they also must be fully cared for and healthy and have their needs met. Because if you're an organic farmer and you make lots of money, but you work 7 days a week and you fall down and break your hip, you're going to lose the farm
Mm.
because you've been neglecting yourself. And so if we expand this out to our planetary situation now, with the real accelerated levels of illness, that is the greatest danger to a cascading collapse of civilization. You see, if we want to turn the boat around, we need to also include the healing of all the people involved in the initiative. It's critically important, and it's really been proven. This is a proven biological science that we can implement. And so that's why our project is touching on areas of science and health and planetary, stewardship, learning how, learning to understand those factors so we can bring them together and be able to afford to eat the healthiest possible way that we desire to eat. And then another thing that's really important that a lot of people are not aware of is the international covenants that protect human rights. And there's one, economic and social and cultural rights. And in there, Article 11 articulates it's an absolute fundamental right of all people to have adequate food, adequate clothing, adequate housing. Well, you see, once you understand this about deuterium, the public food supply is not adequate. It is not adequate anymore. Once we know what's going on and how poisoned our food supply is. And so, because of that, doing a lot of research, trying to figure out what would be the best platform, what would be the best approach to address this. And because empowerment at this time is foremost, there's this history from the United States. And it goes 100 years, started in 1890, and the people self-organized into these associations, fraternities. In today's term, a lot during COVID, you would hear private membership associations or PMAs. What that is this. It's from these days when people would decide there is something we really care about. They built hospitals, a group of black people who were still being discriminated against. They built their own hospitals so they could go in the front door themselves. There was orphanages. There was all kinds of initiatives that they did. They collaborated together and self-organized and helped. So the different members with different skills, they would assist disadvantaged members, and there was a way of equalizing. And it is a viable way for people to implement with structure and organization something that is a project that they're really passionate about, that is like an emergency, like what this is a bit of an emergency right now. Yeah, and be really successful at it and bring creative solutions forward and not have to worry about, I guess you could say, government regulations or that kind of thing, because it falls under very similar, okay, like today when the pharmaceutical companies do trials, okay, well, how come they can't get sued? It's because it's basically under this same structure, because the individuals who join those trials sign a complete releasing of liability to that company. They are fully accepting personal responsibility for their involvement and participation, as long as they're told the truth, right? And so that is very much what the foundation is for these types of organizations and societies. It's when you're ready to say, okay, I'll take the risk. What's the risk? But, to maybe learn how to protect yourself from deuterium. And so it's a very viable model. There's a lot of information out there that isn't very clear about what a PMA really is and what it can be used for. And I almost think some of that is purposeful disinformation to impede the common people from being deeply empowered to organize themselves around issues that really matter to them. And so this is something a lot of people could really benefit from if they are feeling like frustrated and their wheels are turning and they don't see the government responding quick enough. You can create an initiative yourself. There's, I'm sort of simplified it here, but it can be done. And I feel that that's what we've chosen. And so with our association, we have members internationally. We have members in Ireland and England and Spain and South Africa and Australia and in New Zealand and United States and Canada so far. And so, yeah, and I think it's a way to bring this type of beneficial information to the front.
Right.
To empower us. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right. Thanks, guys. Well, it's great to see all these, these educational initiatives and groups getting together to try to better their own lives. Can't wait for it to come down from a top-down sort of method. I mean, it would be nice, and maybe we'll get there one day, but you can't bank on that. All the people that have sort of counted on the government just taking care of them and not being horrible regretted that in the end, typically. I did want to ask one thing. I think I missed one part of it. When you were talking about the Native Americans growing
Mhm.
squash and beans, what area were you talking about? Was that?
Very, like very high, very north,
Yeah.
like close to the Canadian border. I was really surprised how far north they were.
Mhm,
This was not Mexico.
mhm,
This was like up there. And you know what's amazing is in the book, okay?
mhm,
It's it's got archive photos. You can get it. It's like because it's such an old book. And they even had their own implements made with antlers. And these are not taught, these were horticultural methods not taught to them by the
mhm,
settlers.
mhm,
And so it was like, so that's why I was like, oh, that's really, and you know what's really cool is they used to use songs to
mhm,
teach. They would sing songs, and she talks about it. She said that, nobody sings the songs anymore, the corn songs, and one of the lyrics from it, I just remember it, is when they would know when to plant was when the gooseberry leaves are the size of squirrel ears.
mhm,
And so it was a way of observing the environment. And if this, yes,
mhm,
little incredible nuggets, because it didn't have a calendar. So the way we do. And so it was and they used to like, um, dig a hole in the bank, and they wouldn't bring all the vegetables with them. So it was squash. And I really think also for the seeds, the
mhm,
pumpkin seed. So it was squash, the squash seed, sunflower seeds, a type of dried bean, and corn.
mhm,
And that was it. This particular tribe, that was all they grew, right?
mhm,
But they were nomadic, and they would camp in the summer by the river and grow these crops and dry them. They even set up racks that were like fish drying racks to dry the squash, and they would slice it. And so, but I really like in reading the book, it was really about a way of having fallback food.
mhm,
'Cause of course, our body can eat plant foods, but I really think it's not our primary food anymore.
mhm, mhm.
It's a survival food. If anything, plant foods to me would be when I don't have
Mhm,
meat, eggs, fat, then or fish, then I would fall back. And then what am I going to fall back to? You see, I don't want to just take a risk and eat some contaminated organic. I want to have control of that too. And so that's why we have included into our research studying the food plants, and like testing them, growing them out, heirloom. For all we know, there were plants that, and I think there's methods too to grow, just so you know, that
Also treating them afterwards as well.
very much. Many things like peeling them and just how you process them. And like, I think there was a reason why people used to make jelly because they would separate the skin and the seeds,
Mhm,
which is probably where the deuterium is concentrating in the seed,
mhm,
right? Because for that seed to grow. And so we just go, oh, well, just eat it. But no, there's a reason. There's a
mhm.
reason that those foods are processed that way, those
Yeah.
plant foods.
Yeah. It's always interesting to see how different people lived and treated these things. Like obviously, in Mesoamerica, they had a lot more cultivation and they had nixtamalization. They mixed corn with lye and other sorts of
Yeah,
things. Like acorns, I
ash.
think they would mix with ash or clay or something like that, and that would sort of strip out some of the toxins as well. Obviously, cooking, peeling, these sorts of
Yeah,
things. And it was interesting when you said that they didn't use fire much because a lot of the Native Americans in other parts, like especially on the eastern seaboard, were big in wood burning. I was reading history by Thomas Sowell, And he was saying there's a historical record in the 1500s where sailors, when they sailed up and down from the tip of Florida, southern tip of Florida, all the way up to Maine, the entire time was just unbroken, massive, big bonfires all the way up the eastern seaboard. There's such a huge population until some sort of plague wiped out 95% of North America. And the sailors said that there's so much wood smoke because there was big bonfires. It wasn't just little campfires, huge bonfires that they could smell wood smoke up to 200 miles out to sea. It was pretty incredible. And so it's always interesting to hear that because yeah, and then you get to other places like in the Great Plains where they had buffalo, they actually did have access to meat all year. They could do a buffalo drop and one big hunt a
Yes,
year, they had meat for the
yeah,
rest of the year. Yeah, it's always
yeah,
interesting to see that. And it's very interesting to go back and look at the traditional ways people did this to understand it a bit more, check the deuterium, see what the differences are in these different sorts of in the toxins and the traditional ways of making them. Have you come across Dr. Bill Schindler?
no,
So he might be someone you'd be really interested to look up. This is sort of his area of expertise. He was a professor of paleoanthropology and archaeology at University of Maryland. He's since retired from that. He's doing other things now, but he wrote a book called Eat Like a Human. And he talks about how we've just been eating meat this whole time, but through technology in the last sort of 10, 12,000 years, we've been able to sort of figure out how to eat more plants by different ways of lowering the toxic load and improving the bioavailability through these different methods, fermentation, cooking, nixtamalization, mixing it with different sorts of substances and like multi-step
yeah,
processes. And all the traditional ways of eating these things can do that. And that's why this was a tradition. Then we just go, oh no, raw food, raw's best. And it's like, nope, 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 nope. There's a reason we did it this way. But yeah, I think you'd find his work really interesting in his book because it's all about that on the traditional ways people ate it. And predominantly you're eating meat if you could get it. That was the most nutritious form of food, most bioavailable form of food. But if you couldn't and you had to supplement it, this is what we started. This is how we did it through technology, and then cuisine started coming in, and then it's a whole different sort of. It wasn't just survival anymore,
yeah.
but
I
yeah,
really
it's
think
very interesting.
it's connected to civilization.
Hmm.
And I mean, if you look at basically, we as a species have two very necessary, in my opinion,
Hmm.
different structural social orders. And one is the tribal system, which is rooted in the family and the extended family. It's a family structured system, tribalism, like true original, and then which would also be able so that the people, whether they were shepherds or nomads, hunters, so they are semi-nomadic. I mean, the Dene and that in the north, where I'm originally from, is the Northwest Territories of Canada. So I grew up in a very, very remote place in the world. And so they had very specific places that they would move to depending on what time of year it was. And in the summer, they would all come and be together in much larger groups, like up to 400. And then in the winter, they would break up into the smaller family groups, right? And so that's a whole structure, a system, and meat, very meat based. But civilization, if you look back, the bigger the cities get, the harder it is to provide meat. I mean, the very story of Cain and Abel. One was a shepherd and one was the first city builder. And the city builder was the one who planted the garden and grew the vegetables. Because because it's also for convenience, the closeness. It's like a logistics situation, right? So it's like as you move away from living in the country, whether you're, you know, um, nomadic or not, and then we get to civilization. Now, what does civilization do? Civilization gives us our higher knowledge. It's not about not having civilization. I think our challenge is to have sustainable civilization, and I feel that it's really what we need is the two systems, like in nature, predator and prey. There's two in our whole system of the way the nature of our reality exists. It's the dynamic left and right, hot and cold, right? And so I feel that this is one of the reasons why we are in such a crisis, is because the one culture has become so dominant that the permanence, that, and it does serve. It serves science, it serves medicine, it serves discovery. But how many times has civilizations crashed? We have all the ruins all around the world for this very reason. So this is a really, really important topic for us to discuss. And how do we restore homeostasis? And I think it's innate in some of us, like myself. I love being out. Like it's in my genes. And I think that's how it is meant to be. And so to restore that, I think is really relevant. And planetary restoration, okay? The desertification of the world, guys, is really serious and can be reversed. We are able to restore the planet's soils, okay? But it's going to be in a completely new way. We're going to have to change everything about, like, it's going to be new and fresh and different. And it might take us a few hundred years, but I tell you, if we do it, we'll also save civilization.
Mhm.
And I think that's worth doing. I think it's worth really taking serious here, and taking the bull, by the horns, and saying, well, the public, guys, they'll just have to catch up to us. That's all that's going to happen, because they're taking too long. And when the baby's ready to get born, you don't wait. There's no waiting, right? This is an emergency now. Our health is crumbling. There's serious problems around the world, but there are solutions, and healing the soil while we heal ourselves it's like it'll happen together to me. It's meant to be. I think it's our purpose.
Mm.
It's actually what I think is our purpose.
Yeah. Well, I hope it happens either way. I do wonder about the civilization things. That is the argument that you need agriculture for civilization, but there's some prime examples where that wasn't the case. Like in North America, when there was like estimated 100 million people there, some of those were in cities. And what's now St. Louis, there was a city there with full-time lodgings that could house 1 million people at any given time. Massive trade routes in 5 different directions. The people in Washington State, where I grew up, in the Columbia River Basin, they were considered one of the wealthiest civilizations ever, if you considered wealth as a product of, or it's a function of, how much leisure time they had, how much time they had to express to, like, doing all the work that they needed to do and get all the food they needed, and then have leisure time. These guys had the most leisure time in the world of any civilization that's ever existed for everybody, because they had these weirs and nets up. So they just caught just thousands of these massive salmon every day. And so they could just feed their entire population and just do whatever the hell they wanted. And then, you can dream and philosophize and do whatever you want after that. And then even more recent, well, that's very recent actually, but and then in more of the old world civilizations, you have the Mongols, who were pastoralists and hunters, and then they became the Mongol Empire and the Pax Mongolica, where they controlled the largest contiguous empire that's ever existed on Earth, and they ate meat. They were pastoralists. They drank horse blood, ate horse meat, fermented mare's milk, and they hunted as well. In fact, when their armies were moving, they weren't just in like a big column and just going through. They actually spread out. So they were covering 50, 100 miles, this massive army, so that they could be far enough away that they could all live off the land. So they could just do that. So and the Mongols, they didn't like destroy civilizations. They created civilizations. They actually brought China up to the highest manufacturer, the industrial manufacturer in the world at the time. They brought scholars and priests and scientists over from Europe and the Middle East, brought them over to China and swapped them over and tried to get doctors and things like that. So they were big on knowledge. Kublai Khan, of all people, that guy built over 20,000 schools in China during his reign, and it was pretty amazing. So, I think that we don't have to have one or the other. I think we want 100% do both, and then
Yeah.
using the principles that Alan Savory
Yeah.
and Peter Ballerstedt and others have shown that you use animals in the right way, you can regenerate the land. There's far more land, rangeland and forest land than arable land. So you can have all this land that you're not going to be able to build cities on. You're not going to be able to grow crops on, but you can put animals on them and make those animals available for humans to eat and make the land better and more healthy. And I think doing it in those ways can also allow us to maintain our civilization structure, but doing it in a much more holistic way that will actually heal not only us but the planet as well. And then yeah, getting back into that, not a tribalistic point of view, but actually caring about your family, actually being close in the family structure, the community structure. That was so important. Even in cities, in
Mhm.
Rome and in every other major city, you had strong social and family ties.
Mhm.
And that was very, very important. It's only recently that governments have been trying to tear family structures apart, tear community structures apart, um, and tear different sorts of communities apart. Obviously, this is a Marxist ideal. You have to tear apart the family. You have to get rid of the church. You have to get rid of the families, and the community for the individual, because you have to make this everyone beholden to the state, and the state is your community. It is your church. It is your God, and because everything is about giving the state your power, and and so that's part of it. And so I think that that's really important to take back that aspect as well and start raising our kids in a more family community structure, and not just, oh, it takes a village to raise a kid. No, it doesn't. F off. It takes parents to raise a kid, and you need parents that are hands-on. You can't just, oh, go to school and just raise yourself, have the schools raise you. You need to be a part of that. And I think more and more people are getting that now. And especially recently, more people are turning towards homeschooling, which when I was growing up, that was an oddity. That wasn't a very common thing. And but now it's becoming much more common, because people are saying, look, I don't like what you're telling my children. I don't like what you're trying to teach them. I want I want my kids to be my kids and not your kids. And I think this all goes hand in hand. I think this is one big movement that is probably why it's pissing off a lot of the globalists and the Marxists and all these other people that are just pushing all these various agendas. I think that it all comes
Yeah.
it all is related.
It is. And it's because it's what supports these alternative structures is our ability to have friends, to be
Mhm.
close with other people, to be able to trust them with your life. You know, like, I mean, that's how it used to be, like people were like literally watching out and taking care. And, there's something interesting about the Dene language of the Northern First Nations in Canada that I learned that is completely in line with what you're saying about the family. And it just drives us home is they, how in English we have our mom and our dad, and then our dads is we have our uncles and our aunts. And so, and then our cousins and second cousins, and our language is making them be less close to us than our parents. Like uncle isn't as close as my dad. Whereas Dene people, their tradition was their mom, all her sisters, they all are your mom.
Hmm.
Your dad, all your uncles, they're all your dad. All your cousins, they're all your brothers and sisters, because they would, if anyone passed away or died, they automatically, those children were just incorporated into that other
Hmm.
family unit. And I thought,
Yeah.
wow. I love that.
Mhm.
Because the language is bringing closer, bringing closer, strengthening the bond. Because, I mean, there are, stories like, well, there's one that's coming to me. I'm feeling prompted to tell you, so I'll just tell you. And it's meat related. It's a hunting
Okay.
related. Okay, so you'll like. So this was told to me by a chief from Fort Good Hope, which is very far north in Canada. And this is a story about his father when his father was a young man, and they were just settled as a community. So they had been very nomadic, and there were native people in Canada that didn't even know about the World Wars,
Mm.
one or two.
Mm.
They were not contacted until the 50s because of the planes flying over. So the culture is much fresher still. It's not been, yeah, so anyways, so they had got settled, and it was their first winter where they hadn't necessarily hunted and stockpiled as much food because they had a little food post, and a plane would come with supplies. Well, winter come and the plane crashed.
Mm.
And they were like, oh no, because there was no road. There's 13 communities up there still that have no summer year-round road. Okay. So
Mm.
then what they did is the hunters broke up into groups, and his dad, who was about 19, with his friend, and they went in pairs. And some men went to the lake and were fishing. Anyways, they had about a week's ration, and they were a few days out, and they came across tracks. Okay, moose tracks. But the wind was blowing. It's winter time. It's cold, very cold, -40 cold. And so they said, okay, who's going to run? Because you see, they also had that same strategy of endurance running. Once they decide that they're going to go after a large game, right? So his father said, I will run, because he said he was a good runner. And the other friend went back. He said, I will come back for you. Now, this is in the boreal wilderness,
Mm.
okay? And so this young man starts running into the night, following these tracks. Now, what's serious is when it's winter time, okay? You don't want to sweat.
Mm.
Okay. You so he was allowing himself to sweat, which means he was giving his life
Mm.
to get that moose. Because when he said, I will run, it was, I will run until I die or I get the moose. You go back. And so his friend said, we will come back for you. Well, he was successful. And I thought a lot about that story because he got the moose. And he said when he got there, the moose was laying down, exhausted, because it had been running because of fear. And then I had this realization, and he was running on the power of love, because he was thinking about everybody and how he's going to bring that meat home and how happy everyone was going to be. You see, because in that kind of situation, we got to tap into that higher drive, that higher motive, because the fear will also take us over and exhaust us. And so that's sort of like something that is innately in each of us. That depth of commitment when we find our purpose or our calling or our vision to bring something better into the world is kind of like that story. And once you start, don't give up.
Mm.
Don't quit. Don't stop. You'll get there, and the end result might just be laying down waiting for you.
Mm.
You know? Yeah,
Yeah.
laying down waiting. Yeah.
Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia, Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass-fed and finished pasture-raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door, something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high-fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys. I've heard that a lot about endurance hunting, that you just sort of chase it down and they don't necessarily go all that far, and then they're just laying there exhausted. And did they say at all how he survives with the sweating and staying there overnight and things like that, or able
Use
to make
the
a fire or
animal.
something?
They use
Oh,
the animal. They use the animal to keep themselves warm. Yeah, that's what they do. And they drink the blood. They'll
okay.
drink the blood too. Yeah, yeah. And there is ways you dig and you would cover you would use the animal and the body. Sometimes they'll cut the like gut it, and
Hmm.
then that warmth from inside the animal too,
Right.
and then put
Star
boughs.
Wars style.
Yeah. Yeah, like in Star Wars. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. Like it's from true life. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I
Okay.
thought you might like that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I was going to ask you as well. You alluded to some of your health issues, autoimmunity, et cetera, and started having these things improve as you went, um, less plants. But I wanted to see, A, was that just a natural progression for you becoming carnivore, just eating less plants because it worked for you, or did you have a moment where you found this community and said, "Oh, okay, maybe I'll try that"? And what were the main differences when you went carnivore? And did you find further improvement? I mean, and then when you discovered deuterium as well, I don't know if you dabbled with deuterium depleted water or anything like that. Did that then have further effects on your health?
Yes, so basically how I ultimately found the pure carnivore was Dr. Lazlo's.
Hmm.
Because it was through deuterium. Because see, once I had come to understand, whoa, about that, then and because of the lupus, you see, I got interested in the Brown's gas therapy because it's the natural antioxidant and other things. And so George Wiseman, the inventor of that, mentioned deuterium. So then I started looking it up, and that's how I found Dr. Lazlo's. And so I had thought, okay, when I heard people say, oh, they're carnivore, this is what I didn't realize they were talking only meat. I thought it was just sort of almost like what the plant-based community called anyone who still ate meat,
Hmm.
even if they ate vegetables of some kind. And so once I realized I didn't need to eat the plants, I, like I was already hardly eating any anyways. So it was so easy for me to just let them go. And you know what I noticed is because I used to drink alcohol and I stopped drinking alcohol. Um, mm, oh gosh, I've lost count. Not maybe over 5 years ago. And it wasn't that I was an acute heavy drinker or anything, but because of my failing gallbladder, I would have some apple cider and it would sometimes help the acid of my stomach. And so then I didn't like the fact that I had started to regularly drink. It just sort of snuck into my life as my health was declining and I was trying to have relief from this pain. I've had so much pain, right? And so then I went, oh, that's a bad habit. I don't want to have that. So I quit. But what I noticed, it wasn't easy to quit, you know? And I noticed there's like a little voice that says, oh, you've worked hard today. Oh, your knees hurt. Oh, your back hurts. Oh, your whatever. Just have a little bit. It'll help your stomach. That little voice, right? Well, I discovered that carbohydrates have that same little voice. That same little voice. And what I noticed, it's gone completely. I don't even think about eating carbohydrates. I don't crave them. I don't want them. I don't imagine them. It's like, it's so similar to the addiction that the alcohol can create. It's so similar because of the habitual language. You don't even realize. You don't even realize. And so honestly, since I've gone completely plant free, I feel so free.
Nice.
As a woman, the burden of preparing meals and cooking and all of that is gone. It's so much simpler. It, like honestly, there's so many good things, but yes, like I sleep great now. I sleep, I even had this, I used to call it my porcupine quill. It was like a whisker I have a
Hmm.
scar on my chin. It fell out.
Hmm.
So it's like, oh, it's really interesting. So like, I would say, I think the reason I have eyeglasses is from the oxalates. That's what I think caused it, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. But I don't, they're just for reading. Um, but I had honestly, like, I think you know what else I suffer from? I suffer from this really strange type of anemia. I used to eat tons of onions. And then I found out that that it affects your blood. And it's what makes it poisonous for dogs. Onions are poisonous for some animals because I think it affects, and I could be wrong, something to do with the oxygen delivery in the blood. And I was like, because I used to get lightheaded and feel faint. I don't have that anymore. It's
Hmm.
completely gone. And I'm like, so much of what I suffered from was from eating plants. And I remember hating like cabbage when I was a kid. Oh my God. And my parents were these dirt poor people, farmers from the prairies, and that, you force your kids to eat these foods that, it's like, no wonder we have to force us children, because it's like their body knows it's toxic, like really, honestly. So yeah, so that part of it, I'm trying to think, yeah, there's been a lot. Migraines. Oh, I used to suffer from migraines. I haven't had a migraine in so long I can't remember.
Nice.
I know. It's
Mhm.
so amazing. It's so amazing. But, probably, maybe it's because of some of my DNA having been from Indigenous people of North America who really were, known to be primary meat eaters, right? And egg eaters and fish eaters, is what I think. But like 87% I read when I almost lost my gallbladder. Like it was really bad. Like I suffered a lot with it. 87% of all gallbladders removed in Canada is Indigenous women and like
Mm.
Indigenous. Yeah, it's because our system's not adapted to the starch, the high starch. So never mind the diabetes. Like that's a whole nother. But yeah, the gallbladder, huge, huge, huge. So many people have had that, lost that. I'm so glad I still have mine. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
benefit.
Oh, that's great. So, I mean, it's always wonderful to hear these stories and people doing so much better. I also want to say you sent me a very interesting chart. Before we wrap up, I want to show everybody this. You were able to study the levels of deuterium and things, and typically from talking to Laszlo, you want to sort of get below 130, 120 parts per million of deuterium, and so you start getting above that, and then you start having problems in metabolic health. They can the deuterium, which is heavy hydrogen. So hydrogen is just one proton with an electron, and deuterium is a proton but with a neutron. So it's the same charge. It still acts chemically and physically as proton as hydrogen, but it's double the weight. So it's a massive difference, and that actually has a huge role to play structurally and molecularly. So going through your mitochondria can actually damage the mitochondria because you have these hydrogen transport tunnels and molecules. And so that looks like throwing a bowling ball into a blender. It just sort of chews it all up. And so getting your deuterium levels down lower is very good for your overall health, your mitochondrial health, etc. And so the different sorts of foods, it matters. A, being a carnivore, it can help you because you're ketogenic. And when you're ketogenic, that can help make deuterium-free water in your mitochondria. And so your deuterium levels sort of go down, usually below 120. You're drinking water, that's usually about 150 parts per million. So you're, just surviving and hydrating, you're gonna get raised up. And then being ketogenic, that can reduce that. And then just eating the meat itself, that can probably help more because as we're going to see here,
Mhm.
some different foods that we eat have different amounts of deuterium as well. So let me see if I can share my screen. Um,
These are our first test results. We're going to be sending more in.
there we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. See.
So
Oh, there it is. Yep.
I don't know if that's blocking it, but yeah. So we have these here, and we have so we see the optimal levels here in the green, and then the elevated. Didn't seem to find anything that's too horrific, which is great. But even then, you have squash, twinberry, garlic are all in the elevated form. What I think is very funny, what you pointed out, is that you check like this insect meal. They're always trying to push to eat the bugs, but the bugs are actually very high in deuterium. So it's not, it is an animal. It's going to have animal proteins and fats. It's going to have nutrients. That's good. But it's also very high in deuterium. And it's not necessarily the exact nutrition profile that we need. Although I don't think people should completely say that this is something. No, I mean, a lobster is a bug. Crabs are bugs. They have exoskeletons. This isn't something that
Interesting
should
to
be.
test
Don't throw
that.
the baby out with the bathwater. What's that?
I wonder that would be something interesting to test.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially because they live in water and water's high in deuterium too. So I wonder about that. But yeah, so we shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, there are good things. I don't think we should just subsist on insects by any stretch of the imagination. But let's not pretend it's just the worst thing on earth because it does have redeeming factors, but very high in deuterium. But then fat, like you said, fat is very low in deuterium. So that's actually quite low, 113 parts per million. And then lamb, goat, cheese would be in the 120s, and then beef even lower than that. And looks like your beef. So this is the beef that you raise, I presume.
Yeah. And the other one, it was just a random sample I grabbed from the farmers market in the city,
Oh, okay.
just just to have an absolute unexpected, yeah,
Mhm.
test comparison. And so
Yeah.
yeah, and that's goat cheese. Yeah. And so
Okay.
these were, yeah, and it was a wild berry, that twin berry. I'm thinking to do that
Mhm.
exact thing and to put it through a sieve to separate the seed because I sent them in whole
Mm.
to
All
see
right.
if there was a change if we remove the seeds and the skin.
Hmm.
See, because now we
Yeah.
could do.
I guess it also depends on how people normally eat them too. Is it possible to get the seeds out of small berries and things like that too?
Yeah, yeah.
But
But
yeah,
you gotta have a special little sieve, like it's a
yeah.
special type of apparatus. But this is an undomesticated wild type of berry. It's kind of
Mm.
got, yeah, it's got it's almost like the nature of a grape. This
Hmm.
gelatin, it's an unusual berry. That's why I sent it in because it's not been domesticated. But anyways, yeah, it's and like I was saying too about alt the 130 or lower, depending on what you're dealing with, and so very easy. And this was organic. I want to stress this was from an organic garden.
Hmm.
Okay, a really long time friend of mine, Irene, who has a beautiful garden in McBride that got a beautiful farm. She's and so it'll be very interesting to see if we can drop that because it was coming from a really high quality soil and the garlic, so it'll be interesting to see. And so what we're wanting to do is start compiling this data
Mhm.
And as we collect, so members from all around, will send samples in, and then we're gonna start keeping track, and then seeing, okay, and start experimenting, and seeing can we move these numbers? Are there different varieties, heirloom varieties? So now we got to start with a reference point, right? And begin somewhere. And then I really feel that this information, it needs to be like permanently added into our cultural awareness.
Mhm.
So this, you know, it, it's almost criminal that it's taken this long to reach the common people's awareness because it's so relevant. It's so pertinent. Even though there's so many toxins and, people is like, well, what's really, the big bad one? To me, this is the big bad one. This
Mhm.
is the grizzly bear,
Mhm.
okay? Compared to a little lynx, okay?
Mhm.
Like that's the difference. Deuterium is equal to a grizzly bear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder what like the processed foods would be, like the sugar cereals and cakes and muffins and all that sort of
Oh,
garbage.
I'd say 150,
Yeah.
155. I don't even think, like, literally, in my opinion, they cannot be classed as a food.
I don't consider them food. Yeah,
But,
certainly. Just because you
like,
chew it up and you put it in your mouth and chew doesn't mean that it's food. You can do that to anything, literally.
it's not, and it's really not, and it's not adequate. And so this is why, this is an example of people be innovative, figure out how to do this, work together, collaborate together, and find a way to take complete charge of what your family and all the people you love are
Hmm.
consuming, because this is a serious situation.
Hmm.
Know,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like fully convinced this is the number one driver behind all of our um, issues. Because of like what even Stephanie, we were talking about that. It's like the body's potentially has multiple built-in mechanisms as last resorts to try to protect the host from excessive deuterium concentration. And her theory that maybe that's what cancer is a last ditch attempt to
Mm.
kind of like almost like pulling it in and helping it's amazing theory she has. But once you really get a sense of what the deuterium does in the body, it's something that's important in extremely precise low levels. And once we go above that, oh boy, it
Mm.
gets bad fast. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So is this available online on your website, or are there other resources where people can find like the different amounts of deuterium in food? Oh, really?
Eventually,
Eventually,
yes.
yeah, when you
Through
do
our
it.
member, yeah, we're going to make a little publication so
Right.
people can find out more. They can contact me just through my website, which is my name. You can Google my name, and
Mhm.
it'll come up. And it's the Four Corner Table, is what we call our group. And then yeah, and then through that we are on an adventure to see if we can take control and incorporate this. You see, it's about we can learn this stuff, but then how do we incorporate it into our life? Like if we have support and with other people, just like the carnivore community, we
Mhm.
support each other, right? Well, this is like taking it one step farther and really giving it a sound scientific foundation, but and like I said, we'll possibly, possibly, there is a way for us to also super purify our own water at home. And that, I believe, will be an astronomical breakthrough. And I think it is, honestly. We're just testing it right now.
Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be fun.
yeah.
Well, great. Well, Jacqueline, thank you so much for coming on. That was really interesting and a lot of fun to talk to you about all this. How do people find you and support and follow your work?
Yeah, it's just my name, Jackoline Milne.
Mhm.
Google that and you'll find my website.
Okay.
Yeah, the four corner table. That's what we're called. And I might put after when you post, I might make a comment and put it in there too.
Sure. And I'll get the link and put it in the description as well so people can look down below and find
Yeah,
out.
and we're accepting members, so if people are interested and they'd like to join and learn and be part of the research project, then yeah, we're accepting applications for that too.
Perfect. Well, I'll
Yeah.
put that below and people can take a look. Jacqueline, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a lot of fun. And thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. And please do go and check out Jacqueline's website and learn more there. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time. Hey guys, thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to what I had to say. If you like it, then please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. And if you're on YouTube, then please hit that little bell and subscribe, and that'll let you know anytime I have a new video out, which should be every week, if not more. And if you could share this with your friends, that would help me get the word out and let me know that you like what I'm doing. Thanks again, guys.